Thinking and acting across generations is important. That's one of the reasons why we put it as the last item before the ERG Excellence Awards. Here to talk about it, we have Irène Kilubi, initiator and organizational lead, Joint Generations.
Hello.
Hi, good to have you with us. Martina Moreno Hofer, expert for lean HR and digitalization, ERFOLGSSPUR, digital HR solutions. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Thank you too. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Tell me, why is the topic of us talking so important now? It's an obvious question to ask, but I'm really keen to hear your perspective.
Do you want to start, Martina?
Yeah, if you don't mind, then just chime in, because you're the mastermind behind Joint Generations, which is a very important initiative. Even though many people, and coming back to Lucas's question, say, well, it goes without saying, we do encourage the cross-generational work. However, it's like with many other aspects, is walk your talk. That's one thing where you can really see that, some companies are really excelling this already, whether it's managers, team members, trying to really put this into practice. However, there's other companies or organizations where you see everybody's all for it, but just please put the member of this other generation in somebody else's team. And last but not least, before I ask Irène to add her thoughts on that, we're living at a time where we have teenagers or people just entering the 20s working together with people who are spanning across generations, all up to the generations that could be the grandparents, plus the technological developments. And here it's about joining forces, making sure that nobody gets left behind, while recognizing the huge potential in qualifications everybody brings to the table, regardless of his or her date of birth.
Definitely. And I have to say that we at Joint Generations, we strive for bringing different generations together. And as you all might know, the demographic change presents us with major social and economic challenges now and in the future. Due to growing technology demands, older generations are often left behind. However, we feel that digitalization should promote communication between generations instead of hindering them. So decisions in the future can only be made collectively, as everyone, young and old, is a significant part of our system and our future. And in terms of companies, I have to say they face two crucial challenges. On the one hand side, they have to think about how can we longer integrate the older generation into the workforce, while on the other hand side, how can we attract the younger generation to work for us, since they are getting less and less?
Before we your expectations, like employers of the future, can we talk about what are the current challenges in terms of age diversity as you see them, the top ones?
Yeah, I think it's really sort of like Irène said, finding the right balance between, whose expertise do we let in, and do we really manage to look at what's at stake, rather than, or how do we put everybody together as a team so that we can co-create innovations that we can get ahead, meaning how do we make sure that nobody thinks, well, this job is not for me, because it can, I can feel quote unquote too old, or I can feel too young, or at least have sort of get this feedback or get this feeling that I'm, just tolerated or even being singled out. That's one thing. And the other thing is that, at least in my experience, that you can no longer, and I think one wasn't able to do this decades ago anyway, but you cannot no longer say, between age X and Y, this is what's happening in your life, this is what's happening in career, and therefore everybody just goes for that. Instead, you have people, being more independent. Everybody's exposed to changes in their life, in their career. And you even see this if you look at studies that, take the Gen Z. Everybody says, oh, we know the Gen Z is about this and that. However, there are studies that even show that even if you look at the subgroups that you can research within the Gen Z, there's, 7 subgroups, one going to, yes, I want to be more social, I want to reach out to more for my community, versus somebody who says, well, I want to use digitalization, but I want to get ahead with my career. And that's really something that employers have to pick up on and see our working models. 2 days ago, somebody told me we cannot have a shared leadership position between 2 people. Number one, this is not true. And number two, I really caution people to think this is just something when you talk about people coming back from parental leave, for example. You can also have somebody who may come back from parental leave with somebody who wants to take care of their own, elderly family members, share a leadership position, and joining the expertise of the sort of newcomers or the younger ones who might be more savvy in certain technologies with the experience of somebody else. But I'm sure Irène has also something to say about that.
Yes, it might also be interesting for the audience to know that according to a Deloitte study of 2020, more than 70% of organizations believe that managing multi-generational workforces is important to their success. However, only 10% of these organizations feel really prepared for this type of workforce. So we have to bring here onto the table the expression new work. They're facing many challenges. For example, there are more and more asymmetrical leadership relations, meaning that more and more younger managers who are responsible for experienced and long-serving employees who depend on their knowledge, competence, and loyalty. So all in all, considering also what Martina just said, demands and value attitudes pose great challenges for managers in the future. So this is why this topic is so important, and organizations need to cope with those challenges.
Well, you're both absolutely right in that the gap that you have just quoted between what organizations are prepared for is interesting, and makes me ask another question. How often do you come across organizations where you see age inclusion implemented in a way which is both mature, something that would look good in, company bulletins?
Well, if I understood correctly, you were looking for, examples from both sides of the scale. One positive example that comes to mind, since I quoted a less positive one earlier, is a digital consultancy company, which was founded by people, by the way, a diverse team, not just, just to make this clear as well, in their mid-50s. And they asked themselves, which or how would this company would have had to look like so that we would have loved to join it back in the day when we were entering the labor market. So they really had, number one, this mindset. They didn't just leave it, in the garage stage. They really made this a point to welcome and, provide the training for, young professionals who were looking for the first job, as well as people who were, parents of 3 kids, people, who were looking for this special type of job towards the end of their professional career per their own terms. And that is a really good example to see where they really joined forces and also said, we need this, creativity, this drive of younger people who want to contribute their ideas, their technological knowledge. We need to combine that with the sort of more seasoned, in terms of professional seasoned employees who back in the day were exactly like their colleagues, but through their work and life experience, they might have a different take on that. And, this moving back and forth without being chaotic, and also providing, virtual or hybrid work settings for everybody, and other interesting perks and benefits that really help them advance and be successful in a hot market where they were competing for talent, regardless of the age group, against companies who have been in this place for, 10, 20 years or longer, and which have much higher budgets, but they attracted the right people because that was a factor to join that company.
Yeah, thanks
Do
for your
you
input, Martina.
often get... Yeah, Irène, I hope you can hear me. Do you often get inspired by companies that do their age inclusion really well?
Yes, definitely. I will have to say, like, many companies come along and contact us and say, like, please, can you tell me what do the young generations need in a workspace? And how can we make our organization attractive to them? And guess what I'm answering them? I say that's the wrong question. You shouldn't be asking, like, what do the young generations need? What do all employees need, in fact? So you have to create and build a working environment that values employees, that have different sets of backgrounds, including the age differences as well, right? And so it was a very interesting case. There was a professional services company that reached out to us and said, like, we have the opposite challenge, in fact, because we are too young. We need more experienced employees. We need employees that are that can share their knowledge, that have sufficient experience to also be able to transfer what they have learned to the younger generations, because they have another working attitude. After 2 or 3 years, they leave our company, right? So also to have them motivated to stay longer in the company, right? And here it's all about, in the future, about managing, balancing out the different expectations of the younger and the older generations, right? If we look at the Generation Z, for example, they want to feel a certain appreciation. They want to see a purpose in what they are doing. They want to work for a company that has a strong mission. Whereas, for example, the Generation X or the baby boomers, for example, they were always very loyal to their employers, right? Stick there after their studies, their apprenticeship, until they retired, and they wanted to have job security. However, nowadays, when talking in terms of new work, for example, we can see certain commonalities. Both, or we have, in fact, like 5 generations, all the generations have in common today that they really look for employees that place a certain value on sustainability, for example, on diversity, and also on flexible working conditions. And that's my appeal to everyone out there. Look for what do all the generations have in common.
We have a question from the audience, Martina, Irène. It goes like this: How
Yes,
can we
please.
find employees of how can we find age and convince them to join our company when all of our staff is more or less 27 years old?
Sounds like our client, the question, right? I feel like it always starts with communication. How do I present myself? It's also the term employer branding that needs to be addressed here, because most of the time, if I feel that older employees don't see the necessity to apply to my organization, then I'm doing something wrong in representing my company, representing the culture, representing the values, because they feel like, okay, they tend towards more dynamic, young, and freshers. So maybe I'm not the correct fit and the correct match. So they can do everything in terms of employer branding to represent themselves as a company that is age diverse, that is open minded towards many different experiences and settings, and also maybe to depict useful and meaningful cases where intergenerational collaboration has worked out, and also to show in terms of being some sort of generation ambassadors that everyone enjoys working in an age diverse setting.
Thank you, Irène. We also have a question from Pablo. What are your thoughts about implementing quotas in talent acquisition in order to attract new generations?
I'm not sure whether Pablo is referring for the quota, like, to hire a certain percentage of a certain, or the youngest or whatever, another generation. I have mixed feelings about that because, of course, politically, or in terms of, whoever wants to put a number to that, I think that takes away the focus from what Irène was describing before. We should see what we have in common. We should see what skills are sort of, in the best meaning of the word, timeless or crucial for our product development or whatever we're selling or producing as a company, rather than saying, oh, I cannot hire person A from that generation because I've already fulfilled my quota, or by all means I go for, I don't know, 5 more new hires of another generation, just because on paper I have to meet my goal. It's just like you would say, think of the mission statements. Of course, we can put it up in our walls. We trust each other. We communicate openly, but you cannot just really demand people to do something. They have to experience that. And to Irene's point from earlier, the more companies are out there who, of course, already get started with employer branding from hire to retire, whenever that point comes for any given individual. The important part is to really experience it at the company. And I think the worst that can happen to you, and that happened to me when I was entering the workforce, well, you're here because we need you as a younger person. And therefore, I'm not a huge fan of quotas. I'm just more leaning towards the true commitment. And if we succeed together and focus on what we have in common, what we can contribute as a team for the companies, for our own success, then I think we're on a much better way to success rather than with quotas.
Well, I have to say, I have some mixed feelings about that. We have a little time.
Yes.
Okay. I have to admit,
Please,
I have a little...
finish your sentence, Irène.
Okay, no worries. We have a little time lag, I feel, Okay, everything's good. I have a bit of a mixed feeling about that. I totally agree to what Martina said. True commitment is necessary, but sometimes you have to force organizations to their luck, right? I want to give you, again, here a little story. Once someone from my network was promoting an open position for another company. They were looking for people who want to be trained in IT expertise. And they stated, we are looking for people until the age of 30. And I said to her, I don't want to promote it because I don't feel that it's a good thing to do so. Because why shouldn't a person that is 50 years old be interested in this position, right? And so I feel like, and there's also a starting point, for example, in Germany, to say like, there should be some restrictions and nobody should be excluded. We have managed to do it for gender, like to say like women and male are equally welcome, people with who are handicapped, for example, and so on, right? And nowadays, even companies are writing people with immigration background are welcomed. And the same thing should also apply for the dimension of age, which is so far not so much focused on nowadays. So I feel like we should, at the beginning of the course, try to create awareness. However, at the end of the day, if it doesn't work out, we should be considering entering a quota.
We couldn't agree more. Irène, Martina, Moreno, Hofer, ERFOLGSSPUR, Digital HR Solutions, Joint Generations. Thank you so much, and my sincere apologies for the unstable connection.
But we managed it well. Thank you so much. Thank you.